Welcome. This video will summarize the highlights of PedPDX chapter by chapter. The full plan contains more in-depth information and is available for download on our website at pedpdx.com. Chapter 1 of PedPDX explains what this plan includes and why it is important. So what is PedPDX? PedPDX is Portland's citywide pedestrian plan. It prioritizes sidewalk and crossing improvements and other investments to make walking safer and more comfortable across the city. The plan identifies the key strategies and tools we will use to make Portland a great walking city for everyone. Through PedPDX, the City of Portland affirms walking as a fundamental human right and the most fundamental means of transportation. PedPDX ensures walking is a safe, accessible, and attractive experience for everyone in Portland by putting pedestrians at the forefront of city policy, investments, and design. The PedPDX vision: Portland is a great walking city for all. PedPDX includes 3 key elements. It identifies a pedestrian priority network, the network of Portland streets and paths that provide important pedestrian connections to key transit and land use destinations. Each of the streets within the PedPDX priority network is given a pedestrian classification that reflects the level of demand for pedestrian movement on that street. It identifies and prioritizes all sidewalk and crossing needs within that pedestrian priority network and articulates the data-based prioritization framework that we will use to ensure that we are directing our limited resources to the greatest needs first. And finally, it outlines the Pedestrian Toolbox, the programmatic work plan to advance the mission and vision of PedPDX. The toolbox contains the key strategies and actions that we will use to implement the plan. Why is walking important? Everybody is a pedestrian. Walking with or without the aid of a mobility device is part of each of our everyday lives, whether we think about it or not. Making walking a safe and attractive choice for all and increasing the number of people walking in Portland can help us address many issues important to Portlanders. Pedestrian safety and access is an equity issue. Walking is the most accessible form of transportation available, requiring no fare, no license, and little equipment. Walking and transit are often the only options for the young, old, disabled, or poor, or others with limited transportation choices. Pedestrian infrastructure is key for those who rely on transit and need a safe way to reach transit. In Portland, inadequate pedestrian infrastructure and traffic safety concerns disproportionately impact low-income communities and people of color. The orange lines in the map at the left show where sidewalks exist in Portland. The darker orange areas in the map on the right indicate areas of the city where low-income and non-white populations are highest. The maps combined show us that sidewalks tend to be missing in neighborhoods with higher equity concerns, particularly in the outer neighborhoods of East Portland, while inner neighborhoods tend to have very good sidewalk coverage. As cost-burdened Portlanders are increasingly displaced to the periphery of the city in the pursuit of affordable housing options, many are being displaced to neighborhoods with inadequate pedestrian infrastructure. There's a strong link between walking activity and individual and public health outcomes. Daily walking is one of the easiest ways to incorporate movement within daily activities and improve health and reduce the risk of chronic diseases. However, the presence and quality of public infrastructure plays a major role in one's ability to safely and comfortably walk, and as such, greatly influences both public and individual health outcomes. Ensuring that all of Portland's neighborhoods are walkable is therefore critical in terms of improving the long-term health of all who live here, and ensuring that good health is equally attainable to all no matter where in the city you live. Nearly 40% of all local carbon emissions come from transportation sources. Shifting our transportation patterns from driving to environmentally sustainable modes such as walking, biking, and public transit plays a major role in minimizing climate impacts. Walking is the most sustainable form of transportation there is. Creating a city where walking is a safe and comfortable choice that more people are able to make is critical to achieving our climate goals. While the population and demands on our transportation system are growing, space within city streets is not. Successfully absorbing growth means moving more people in the same amount of space. To do this, we must encourage more people to travel by walking, biking, and transit. The figure on the screen illustrates the potential capacity of different facilities and modes. Sidewalks have the capacity to move more people than almost all other forms of transportation. These images show how much physical space 200 people take up in private automobiles, on bikes, and on one light rail train. However, these photos of busy downtown Portland show that our sidewalks have the capacity to move an enormous amount of people and present an opportunity to maximize the capacity of the infrastructure we already have. Finally, walkable urbanism is the foundational element of great neighborhoods and great cities. Walking is more than just a mode of transportation. It provides a way for people to slow down, interact with neighbors, enjoy public art, and interact with the city in a different way. Extending the benefits of walkable neighborhoods to all Portlanders is critical. Chapter 2 of PedPDX outlines the plan's mission, vision, goals, and objectives. The PedPDX mission, vision, goals, and objectives guide every aspect of the plan. Each of the plan's elements tie directly back to the foundational mission, vision, goals, and objectives. In addition to the PedPDX mission and vision presented at the beginning of this presentation, PedPDX includes 4 key goals. These were developed in collaboration with our Community Advisory Committee. They are: equitable and inclusive. Make Portland walkable and accessible for all, no matter who you are or where you live. Safe and secure. Make walking in Portland safe and secure for everyone. Comfortable and inviting. Provide a comfortable, inviting, and connected pedestrian network that supports walkable neighborhoods and strengthens community. Healthy people and environment. Increase walking for transportation and recreation in Portland as a means of achieving improved health outcomes for all people and for the environment. PedPDX also includes 6 objectives to help us meet our goals. Each of the actions in the PedPDX toolbox speak directly to one or more of these 6 objectives. The City of Portland has a reputation for walkability. The city crafted one of the country's first pedestrian master plans and set national precedent with its walking-first strategy for people movement. The design of the central city and inner east side neighborhoods with small blocks oriented on a grid are friendly to walking. However, many challenges have persisted, and the experience of walking varies widely across the city. Chapter 3 of PedPDX catalogs existing conditions for pedestrians in Portland today. This helps us better understand the challenges that PedPDX needs to address. Walkability is somewhat subjective and can be a difficult quality to measure. However, we can use available data to provide a snapshot of what it's like to walk in Portland. Pedestrian activity data tells us how many people are walking in Portland today. The table on the screen shows that while the city has a goal for 7.5% of Portlanders to walk to work, the most recent U.S. Census data indicates that only 6% of Portlanders commute to work by walking. We are not yet meeting our goals for walking activity. Evaluating Portland's walking rate against other cities also helps us understand how the city is performing and shows that there is room for improvement in Portland. Portland is number 10 in walk-to-work rates among cities with populations of over 500,000. Pedestrian safety data is another quantifiable way to measure walkability and is an indication of how safe Portland streets are for walking. Portland is a Vision Zero city. We are committed to ending all traffic-related deaths and serious injuries on Portland streets by 2035. The chart on the screen shows pedestrian fatalities in Portland from 1996 to 2015. Generally, we experience anywhere from 8 to 18 pedestrian fatalities on our streets in a given year. Even one is too many. Pedestrians in particular suffer a disproportionate number of traffic deaths compared to other modes of transportation. While pedestrian trips account for approximately 9% of all trips taken in Portland, 31% of all traffic fatalities involve people walking. People walking in Portland are 10 times more likely than people driving to sustain a serious or fatal injury. Approximately 20% of pedestrian crashes in Portland result in a fatality or serious injury. That's 1 in 5. Portlanders that have to walk, including those who are transit reliant, are most exposed to these systematic safety issues. To better understand the roadway and behavioral trends potentially correlated with pedestrian crashes in Portland, PedPDX analyzed all reported pedestrian crashes since 2005 to identify potential patterns. Our analysis showed some factors that may be negatively influencing pedestrian safety in Portland. We have integrated these findings directly into the PedPDX prioritization framework and toolbox. The PedPDX safety analysis found that lighting conditions play a significant role in pedestrian crashes in Portland. Despite lower overall numbers of people walking in dark fall and winter months, we see a dramatic increase in pedestrian crashes in fall and winter when there are fewer daylight hours. To help address pedestrian safety in dark conditions, the PedPDX toolbox in Chapter 6 includes actions to improve lighting and improve visibility of people walking in dark conditions in Portland. In addition to looking at temporal trends, the PedPDX safety analysis also evaluated the location of all reported pedestrian crashes in Portland in an effort to identify potential location trends. The analysis showed that 2/3 of all pedestrian crashes occurred at intersections and that over 40% of crashes occurred at signalized intersections. What's more, the majority of those collisions occurred when the pedestrian had the walk indication. This tells us that the existence of traffic signals is not enough to help keep pedestrians safe at crossings. Several tools in the PedPDX toolbox are intended to help address this need to improve pedestrian safety at signalized crossings. The PedPDX safety analysis also found that pedestrian crashes are significantly more likely to occur on larger roadways. They are over 5 times more likely to occur on 3- and 4-lane roadways, and over 11 times more likely on roads with 5 or more lanes. This finding was directly incorporated into the PedPDX prioritization framework. Finally, we can measure walkability by how complete or incomplete our sidewalk and crossing infrastructure is across the city. PedPDX conducted a citywide analysis to identify all sidewalk and crossing gaps on our busy arterial and collector street network. The map on the screen shows all sidewalk gaps on the pedestrian priority network, which we'll talk about next. Streets in green show where sidewalks are present on both sides of the street. Streets in blue, where sidewalks are present only on one side of the street. Streets in purple show where no sidewalk is present on either side of the street. The sidewalk gap analysis shows that 32% of our busy arterial and collector streets have no walkways or sidewalks present on either side of the roadway. In total, there are approximately 350 miles of missing sidewalk on our busy arterial and collector streets. This does not include sidewalks that may be missing on local residential streets. This is likely much more than we will have resources to address. For context, PedPDX found that in the 20 years since the 1998 Pedestrian Master Plan was adopted, we have constructed, repaired, or rebuilt approximately 250 miles of sidewalk in Portland. The remaining 350 miles of missing sidewalk is well beyond the 20-year planning horizon of PedPDX. Given the enormity of this need, we know we will have to prioritize. In addition to sidewalks, PedPDX places great emphasis on crossings as a critical piece of the pedestrian network. To help us better identify locations where there are potential gaps in the crossing network, PedPDX includes new guidelines for how frequently marked crossings should be provided in Portland moving forward. These spacing guidelines are calibrated to pedestrian classifications. Within pedestrian districts where there are more pedestrian generators and more people walking, marked crosswalks should be provided more frequently. PedPDX uses these new crossing spacing guidelines to identify potential gaps in the pedestrian network. The streets in green are street segments that currently meet the city's new crossing spacing guidelines. The streets in red are locations that do not currently meet the new crossing spacing guidelines. While additional engineering analysis is required in locations with a gap to determine if a marked crossing is indeed warranted, this planning level analysis shows us that across the city, we need about 3,500 additional marked crosswalks on our busy arterial and collector streets to meet our new crossing spacing guidelines. This is more than we can likely provide in the next 20 years. For context, PedPDX found that in the 20 years since the 1998 Pedestrian Master Plan was adopted, we installed or reinstalled approximately 2,500 crosswalks. Similar to our sidewalk needs, given the enormity of need for new marked crosswalks, we must prioritize. Chapter 4 of PedPDX identifies the Pedestrian Priority Network. This Pedestrian Priority Network is the network of Portland streets and paths that provide important pedestrian connections to transit and other key destinations. The Pedestrian Priority Network and the prioritization of needs within it are directly shaped by the community input received in the PedPDX Citywide Walking Priorities Survey. We received over 5,000 responses to the survey in 5 different languages. The survey asked Portlanders to tell us which kinds of places are the most important to improve for walking in Portland. Residents from almost every district identified the same top 3 issues, though at times in somewhat different orders. Portlanders' most reported demand-based priority locations for walking improvements are streets connecting people to transit and bus stops, streets connecting families and children to schools, and streets connecting people to neighborhood commercial districts. The pedestrian priority network directly reflects these demand-based priorities. Each of the streets within the pedestrian priority network is given a pedestrian classification that reflects the level of demand for pedestrian movement on that street. The street classifications that together make up the pedestrian priority network from highest demand to lowest demand are pedestrian districts. These are comprised of designated centers as defined by Portland's 2035 Comprehensive Plan, where high levels of pedestrian activity exist or are expected in the future, such as the Center City and the Gateway District. They also include streets within a quarter-mile walk of major transit stations. Major city walkways. These walkways have a high number of transit and land use destinations and are streets where we would expect a high number of pedestrians. Major city walkways are generally comprised of civic and neighborhood corridors and main streets as defined in the city's Comprehensive Plan and Transportation System Plan. They also include streets along the planned and existing frequent transit network. City walkways. These streets serve moderate pedestrian demand and are generally comprised of major traffic streets, collector streets, and streets with non-frequent transit service. Neighborhood walkways serve neighborhood-level demand, typically on local residential streets, and are generally comprised of designated safe routes to school and neighborhood greenways. This demand-based approach to identifying a pedestrian priority network ensures that pedestrian improvements are prioritized on streets that provide access to important walking destinations, including goods, services, jobs, and transit. It also helps to implement the city's 2035 Comprehensive Plan vision to create walkable centers, main streets, and corridors. The plan includes a citywide map of the pedestrian priority network, as well as district maps that show the pedestrian classifications for each area of the city. Additionally, PedPDX.com provides a scrollable map where you can see in detail how the streets in your neighborhood are classified. PedPDX worked with each of the city's 7 district coalitions to review and refine the pedestrian priority network and classifications. The city's transportation system plan will be updated to reflect these new pedestrian classifications. The need for new sidewalk and crossings is extensive. Given the enormity of sidewalk and crossing needs across the city, we are obligated to ensure that we are directing resources to locations with the greatest need first. Chapter 5 describes how PedPDX identifies priority locations for pedestrian investment within the pedestrian priority network. Why do we prioritize? Everywhere we look, we see places that need to be improved to provide a safe, inviting, and accessible pedestrian network. Despite these clearly defined needs, the city has limited resources to address them. PedPDX identifies priority locations for pedestrian investment using a data-based approach. Using a data-based approach helps ensure we are directing limited resources to locations with the greatest need first. It aligns our spending priorities with adopted city goals and policies and the public's stated priorities, and creates a process that is transparent and repeatable. Furthermore, a data-based approach to prioritizing sidewalk and crossing needs helps ensure that we provide needed improvements in an equitable manner across the city, rather than responding to individual requests, which may not always be where demands of safety, equity, and pedestrian need are greatest. A data-based approach allows us to provide a programmatic, proactive approach for addressing pedestrian infrastructure needs. The PedPDX prioritization framework is based directly on the priorities that Portlanders told us in the PedPDX Walking Priority Survey are most important to them. Those top priorities all revolve around the topics of equity, safety, and demand. To align PedPDX with the citywide racial equity goals and strategies, PBOT's racial equity plan, and the public's stated priorities, PedPDX prioritizes pedestrian investments in locations with high equity needs. The plan measures equity citywide using race and income data in accordance with the PBOT equity matrix and national best practice. Street segments in blue and dark blue are those with the highest equity needs. Streets in gray or green are those with fewer equity concerns. Pedestrian safety was also a key priority expressed by residents in the Walking Priority Survey. Portlanders want to prioritize pedestrian improvements on streets where people walking have been killed or injured and on busy arterial streets. Prioritizing pedestrian investments on our busiest, most dangerous streets for pedestrians is also in alignment with the city's Vision Zero commitment to end traffic deaths and serious injuries on Portland streets. In establishing criteria for measuring pedestrian safety, PedPDX seeks to look not only to locations where pedestrian crashes have occurred in the past, but also to locations where roadway and behavioral characteristics are potentially correlated with pedestrian crashes. The intent is to make changes before crashes happen. As such, the PedPDX safety criteria are drawn directly from the pedestrian safety existing conditions analysis described in Chapter 3. Street segments in red or orange are those with higher safety needs. Streets in blue or green are those with lower safety needs. To quantify pedestrian demand, the PedPDX prioritization assigns scores to major city walkways, and neighborhood walkways, and to local streets. Higher point values are allocated to streets where more people are expected to walk, major city walkways, for example, and lower point values are assigned to streets where less pedestrian activity might be expected, such as local streets. Street segments in blue or dark blue are those with higher expected pedestrian demand. Streets in green or light brown are those with lower expected pedestrian demand. The overall PedPDX prioritization is equal to the sum of the equity, safety, and demand scores. Street segments with the highest aggregated equity, safety, and demand scores are in Tier 1 locations, indicated in purple. Street segments with lower aggregated equity, safety, and demand scores are in lower tiers, with Tier 5 as the lowest scoring and lowest priority. Sidewalk crossing and other pedestrian needs within these high-priority locations will be prioritized for near-term investment. The PedPDX evaluation of equity, demand, and safety per the methodology and criteria described here will be applied every 2 years. This allows us to evaluate and identify infrastructure investment priorities using up-to-date data. Known sidewalk and crossing gaps will be compared against these prioritized street segments to identify high-priority needs for near-term investment on an ongoing basis. PedPDX then applies the prioritization framework to the sidewalk and crossing gaps identified in Chapter 3 to identify near-term investment priorities within the pedestrian priority network. These maps identify the sidewalk and crossing needs that currently lie within top-tier priority locations. These needs will be prioritized for capital improvements by the Pedestrian Network Completion Program and will be used to help determine how pedestrian-related projects are selected from the TSP for implementation and grant funding opportunities. In theory, street segments with the highest scores, Tier 1, will be addressed first. However, other factors will be considered in identifying near-term sidewalk and crossing implementation opportunities, including leverage opportunities, funding sources, project readiness, and feasibility. As needs in top-tier locations are systematically addressed, needs in lower tiers will be subsequently addressed. Chapter 6 of PedPDX outlines the PedPDX Implementation Toolbox. While the prioritization framework identifies infrastructure needs at specific locations, the Implementation Toolbox provides citywide strategies and actions for making Portland a more walkable city for all. The toolbox is directly informed by the Walking Priority Survey, the PedPDX Safety Analysis, work sessions with technical staff, and focus groups with impacted community members. In recognition of low response rates to our Walking Priority Survey from members of the African and African American community, PBOT staff worked with community partners, including the Portland African American Leadership Forum, the Black Parent Initiative, and immigrant and refugee community organization Africa House, to host 2 Walking While Black focus groups to better understand their priorities and concerns. Nearly 50 community members participated in these sessions. In comparing the feedback we heard from African and African American Portlanders to the citywide survey results, some important differences did emerge. Notably, participants in the Walking While Black focus groups underscored the importance of better street lighting in Portland to improve traffic safety and also to provide a better sense of personal safety and security in the public realm. In response to this input, several actions within the PedPDX toolbox speak to this need for better lighting on our streets and sidewalks. We also held toolbox workshops with members of the disability community in an effort to identify solutions to make walking safer and more friendly for everyone. The ideas generated during this workshop directly influenced the implementing strategies and actions in the PedPDX toolbox. The toolbox is organized by strategies and actions. Strategies are the approaches we will use to advance the PedPDX vision. Actions describe the specific means by which a strategy will be implemented. For each strategy, a quick reference table of all actions that support that particular strategy is provided. There are 13 strategies and 67 actions in total. Each action supports one or more of PedPDX's 6 objectives. Each action also provides a cut sheet that provides more detailed information. The cut sheet defines the action and explains its intended effect on the pedestrian experience. The cut sheet also notes considerations that staff and implementing partners should take into account as the action is implemented. We encourage you to review the full PedPDX toolbox to see all 67 actions we will use to make Portland a more walkable city for all. Included as part of the PedPDX toolbox are design concepts for alternative pedestrian walkways. Because of the expense of traditional sidewalks, addressing this need with traditional concrete sidewalks will take many years, likely much longer than the 20-year horizon of this plan. Portland residents cannot wait another 20 years or more to address gaps in the sidewalk network. Providing lower-cost pedestrian walkways will allow us to provide critical pedestrian safety improvements sooner to more residents who need them now. Lower-cost and alternative walkway designs are not new to Portland. Most of the alternative walkway design types presented in this toolbox were included in the 1998 Pedestrian Design Guide. PedPDX clarifies the design elements for each of the alternative pedestrian walkway types, as well as the roadway and traffic thresholds where these alternative designs are appropriate. Finally, Chapter 7 of PedPDX discusses how the plan will be implemented. In Portland, pedestrian improvements are provided by a variety of programs and activities. While PBOT's Pedestrian Network Completion Program is directly charged with expanding the city's network of sidewalks, walking paths, and crossings, multiple city programs and bureaus help contribute toward making Portland a more walkable city. Chapter 7 describes the various ways that pedestrian improvements are provided in Portland and how these programs and activities will be guided by PedPDX. It also provides performance measures by which we will track our progress toward meeting our plan goals and implementing the actions in the PedPDX toolbox. Tell us what you think. Review the plan and take our survey at pedpdx.com now through May 3rd.